All right, there we go. Hani buju, minugijip, nibanami kana bamose indigenakas mangan dodem, ginoshikaning and donjba, Anishinaabe and Dao. Good morning, everybody. My name is Bryan Newland. I'm Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs here at the Department of the Interior, and I'm really glad to be back home-ish in the Great Lakes region. And prior to serving in this role, I served alongside many of the tribal leaders here as tribal chairman for my own tribe, the Bay Mills Indian community. And I just have to say it's a blessing to be amongst them again. I learned a lot from them during my time as tribal leader, and particularly through the pandemic when I watched many of my friends here lead not only their communities, but serve as examples for pandemic response for the entire nation. And so I'm really glad and honored to be here. And Senator Smith, grateful for the invitation from the committee to appear before you today. And also grateful, Chairman Anderson, for hosting this hearing, this field hearing. It's always great for us to have an opportunity to get out into Indian country and into communities where we're hearing directly from tribal leaders and representatives. So in total, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, invests, as you noted, Senator, more than $13 billion directly into tribal communities, and tribes may apply for billions more through various other grant programs. From this law, the department has received more than $3.1 billion directly for tribal communities, and tribes have been made eligible by Congress for additional department programs to support building resilience for wildland fire and drought, restoring ecosystems, and enabling fish passage. The department began implementation of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act with 3 tribal consultations covering all of the programs for which tribes are eligible. And we heard some consistent themes in those consultations, including the need for interagency coordination, technical assistance, and streamlining our permitting process. The White House Council on Native American Affairs and its committees meet regularly to discuss our work to implement the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. And our Indian Affairs spend plan includes the creation of an interagency coordinator position and regional positions to directly provide tribes with the technical assistance we heard during those consultation programs. The timely approval of permitting and realty actions are critical to success, and the BIA recently issued an update to our permitting national policy memorandum to streamline the rights of way and business leases for projects that are funded by the American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, as well as telecommunications and renewable energy projects. We want to make sure that we are not the choke point that keeps this money from turning into benefits at the tribal community level. Overall, Indian Affairs within the Department of the Interior received $466 million through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, which included $216 million for tribal climate resilience, adaptation, and community relocation. And in addition to our grant program on this topic, the department will announce several community relocation pilot projects to serve as demonstration sites for the United States to relocate willing communities on the front lines of climate change. And we know that leveraging federal funding through this act and the rescue plan and other appropriations with our partner agencies is going to be critical to our success. We also received $250 million for irrigation and power, safety of dams, and water sanitation, with $50 million available to us to spend each year. And this funding is critical to address our deferred maintenance backlog in these areas. In FY22, we allocated $10.6 million for water sanitation. Water and sanitation project funding has been coordinated with IHS and will be used to support improvement and repair projects that address public health and safety compliance issues at our BIA-owned drinking water and sanitation systems. In FY22, let me back up, Senator, and just note that even though those are BIA-owned systems, that they are direct service systems and directly benefit people in tribal communities. In FY22, we allocated $10 million for irrigation and power projects. Within this total, 70% are directed to Indian irrigation projects, and 30% of that funding is used to support BIA-owned power utilities. And for safety of dams, we invested $29.1 million in FY22 to begin to address the $1 billion deferred maintenance backlog for BIA-owned dams. The department has received funding in other areas from the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. In February, for example, we allocated $1.7 billion to fund Indian water rights settlements that have been enacted and fulfilled all of the outstanding federal payments necessary to complete the terms of those settlements. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act also provided $150 million to address orphan wells and well sites on tribal lands. And the Act provided the department with $905 million for ecosystem restoration and resilience funding. Tribes and tribal lands are eligible for most of that funding, whether through grants, agreements, or contracts. And in this fiscal year, BIA received as a portion of the department's funding $4.8 million for these activities. We are also providing nearly half of those funds as competitive grants through the America the Beautiful Challenge Fund administered through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Indian Affairs is engaged with other federal agencies to implement the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. And for example, the BIA is in the process of allocating funding from the Department of Transportation to tribes for the Tribal Transportation Program here in Minnesota and across the nation. So these are just some of the examples and highlights of the work we're doing under the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. I do want to note that between the American Rescue Plan and the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, tribes here in Minnesota have received nearly $47 million in funding, separate and apart from the rescue plan funding that the Treasury Department distributed to tribes. So this has been a historic level of investment in Indian country. And as Chief Executive Benjamin mentioned, we've got a lot of catching up to do. And I've heard a tribal leader in one of our consultations describe this as the great catch-up. Not the great bottle of ketchup, but the great catch-up on infrastructure investment. And it has been transformative in many tribal communities and is a great way for us to start in our work between our co-equal branches of government and meeting our trust responsibilities. So Senator Smith, I want to thank you and thank the committee for inviting me to testify today. We have submitted our complete testimony for the record, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fowler.